What happens when humanity, the youngest species in the galaxy, dares to say no to beings who have ruled the cosmos for millennia? What occurs when Earth's children refuse to bow before ancient powers that view them as nothing more than primitive upstarts? The Galactic Assembly thought they knew humans. They believed we were just another species to be controlled, manipulated, and eventually discarded when we outlived our usefulness. They saw our kindness as weakness, our diplomacy as submission, and our peaceful nature as cowardice. They were catastrophically wrong. Sometimes, the most dangerous warning comes not with roars of rage or displays of force, but with a single, quiet word that carries the weight of absolute certainty. Sometimes, the most terrifying threat is delivered not as a promise of destruction, but as a simple suggestion for survival. This is the story of humanity's darkest hour, when the entire galaxy turned against us. This is the tale of how Earth's children, cornered and betrayed, issued one final message that would echo through the stars for generations to come. This is the story of the day humanity said escape. And meant it. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood at the observation deck of Station Kepler, watching the swirling nebula of Andromeda stretch across the viewport like a cosmic painting. 50 years had passed since humanity first made contact with the Galactic Assembly, and 30 since they had been granted membership as a junior species. Today marked what should have been a celebration of their integration into galactic society. Instead, Sarah felt a cold dread settling in her stomach. The communication from Earth had arrived 3 hours ago, encrypted with the highest security protocols. Director Hamilton's face had been grim as he delivered the news that would change everything. The Assembly Council had voted unanimously on Resolution 4471X, officially reclassifying humanity as a containment risk to galactic stability. Sarah reviewed the footage again on her personal tablet, her hands trembling slightly as she watched the proceedings. The Great Hall of the Assembly was massive, its crystalline walls reaching toward a dome that displayed a real-time view of the galaxy. Representatives from over 3,000 species filled the amphitheater-style seating, their diverse forms a testament to the incredible variety of life the universe had produced. At the center, Speaker Zilthan of the ancient Veltar Empire raised his 4 arms, calling for attention. The Veltar were among the oldest species in the Assembly, their civilization spanning over 50,000 years. Their pale, elongated forms and large black eyes had long ago adapted to the low-light environments of their home systems. Fellow beings of the Assembly, Zilthan's voice carried perfectly through the chamber's advanced acoustics, automatically translated into thousands of languages. We gather today to address a growing concern that threatens the very foundation of our peaceful coexistence. Sarah paused the recording and looked out at the stars again. She had been at this station for 5 years, serving as humanity's primary diplomatic liaison to the Outer Rim sectors. The work had been challenging but rewarding, building relationships with species that most humans would never encounter. She had believed they were making progress, that humanity was slowly but surely earning its place among the galactic community. How naive she had been. Resuming the playback, she watched as Zilthan gestured to a holographic display that materialized above the chamber floor. It showed a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy, with various colored zones indicating different levels of assembly control and influence. The species known as humanity, Zilthan continued, has demonstrated patterns of behavior that our xenopsychologists have classified as inherently destabilizing. Their rapid technological advancement, their refusal to accept traditional hierarchical structures, and, most concerning of all, their tendency to inspire other junior species to question established order. A murmur ran through the assembled delegates. Sarah noticed several of the newer species shifting uncomfortably in their seats, while the more established powers nodded approvingly. Representative Korth of the Makari hegemony stood next, his reptilian features harsh under the chamber's lighting. The Makari had been one of humanity's stronger supporters in the early days, but recent trade disputes had soured the relationship. The humans claimed to advocate for equality among species, Korth hissed, his forked tongue flicking nervously. But their very existence challenges the natural order that has maintained galactic peace for 30 millennia. They refused to acknowledge their place as a junior member, constantly pushing boundaries and questioning decisions made by their betters. Sarah felt her anger rising as she watched Korth present fabricated evidence of human aggression. Images flashed across the display showing human colonies establishing trade relationships with unaligned worlds, human merchants offering better terms than established assembly corporations, human diplomats mediating disputes that older species had preferred to leave unresolved. Everything that made humanity valuable to the galaxy was being twisted into evidence of their threat. The debate continued for hours. Speaker after speaker rose to condemn humanity's disruptive influence on galactic stability. They spoke of human colonists who refused to accept second-class status on assembly worlds, of human scientists who questioned established theories, of human artists whose work inspired revolutionary thoughts among oppressed populations. Only a handful of voices spoke in humanity's defense, and Sarah noticed with growing alarm that most were representatives of the youngest assembly members, species that had joined within the last few centuries. The ancient powers had clearly decided that humanity had outlived its usefulness. The vote, when it came, was devastating. 3,047 votes in favor of Resolution 4471X. Only 63 against. 12 abstentions. Humanity had been declared a containment risk. Sarah turned off the recording and activated her personal communicator. The encrypted channel connected her directly to Earth's diplomatic corps headquarters in Geneva. "Director Hamilton," she said when the familiar face appeared on her screen. "I've reviewed the full proceedings. This isn't just about political pressure or trade disputes. This is systematic. They've been building this case for years." Hamilton nodded grimly. He was in his 60s, his gray hair and weathered face showing the strain of 3 decades of interstellar diplomacy. "We've reached the same conclusion here. The intelligence reports are disturbing, Sarah. Assembly fleets are already moving into position around our outer colonies. They're calling it protective positioning, but the tactical analysis is clear." "Blockade," Sarah said. It wasn't a question. Worse. "Our sources suggest they're planning what they're calling guided evolution. Forced relocation of human populations to designated worlds under assembly supervision. Mandatory genetic counseling to reduce what they call our disruptive tendencies. Essentially, they want to domesticate us over the next few generations." Sarah felt sick. What about our allies? The Centauri Federation? The Free Traders Alliance? Already backing away. The Centaurians sent a formal apology but made it clear they won't risk assembly sanctions for our sake. The Free Traders are dissolving their agreements with human worlds as we speak. We're on our own, Sarah. Through the viewport, Sarah could see the running lights of ships beginning to gather in the distance. Assembly vessels, their sleek forms unmistakable even at this range. They weren't hiding their presence anymore. "What are my orders, Director?" Hamilton was quiet for a long moment, and, when he spoke, his voice carried a weight Sarah had never heard before. "Pack everything that matters, Sarah. Download every file, every contact, every piece of intelligence you can get your hands on. But do it carefully. We don't want them to know we're aware of what's coming. And then? Then, you follow the emergency protocols. Get to the rendezvous point and wait for extraction. We're pulling all our people back, Sarah. Every diplomat, every trader, every human in assembly space. We're bringing them all home." The connection ended, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts and the growing fleet outside her window. She began to understand the true scope of what was happening. Humanity was being expelled from the galactic community, cut off from the stars they had worked so hard to reach. But, as she started to pack her belongings, Sarah found herself thinking about something Director Hamilton hadn't said. He hadn't talked about surrender or negotiation or finding some way to appease the assembly. Instead, he had talked about bringing everyone home and mentioned emergency protocols that were so classified she had never even heard them referenced before. What was Earth planning? The question haunted her as she worked through the night, carefully downloading decades of diplomatic files and intelligence reports. Outside, more ships continued to arrive, until the space around the station was filled with the assembled might of 3,000 civilizations. As dawn approached on the station's artificial day cycle, Sarah's communicator chimed with an incoming message. The sender was listed as friend with a security classification she didn't recognize. The message was simple: "The old game is ending, Sarah. Time to show them what humanity really is. Be ready. She stared at the words for a long time, feeling a chill run down her spine. Something was coming, something the assembly hadn't planned for. Humanity might be outnumbered 3,000 to 1, might be facing the combined might of the galaxy's oldest and most powerful civilizations, but they weren't going quietly. As she sealed her personal effects into shipping containers, Sarah Chen began to suspect that the assembly had made a critical error in their calculations. They had studied human psychology, human society, human politics. But they had missed something fundamental about what happened when humanity felt truly threatened. They were about to learn that there was a difference between humans at peace and humans at war. Outside her window, the assembly fleet continued to grow, confident in their overwhelming superiority. They had no idea that their greatest victory was about to become their worst nightmare. Admiral Marcus Webb stood in the command center of the UES Defiance, Earth's most advanced warship, watching the tactical displays with growing concern. The assembly fleets had moved faster than their worst-case scenarios predicted. Within 72 hours of the vote, over 200 systems containing human colonies or outposts were surrounded by overwhelming alien forces. The bridge hummed with quiet efficiency as his officers processed incoming reports from across human space. Lieutenant Commander Torres approached with a datapad, her usually steady hand showing slight tremors. "Admiral, we've lost contact with the Kepler station." Ambassador Chen's final transmission confirmed assembly forces have taken control of the facility. All diplomatic staff have been detained pending processing. Webb nodded grimly. Sarah Chen was one of their best, but she was now beyond their help. Like thousands of other humans scattered across assembly space, she would have to rely on the emergency protocols and hope the extraction teams could reach her in time. "What's our status on the evacuation?" he asked. 70% of our people have reached the designated rally points, Torres reported. "But, sir, the assembly isn't letting anyone leave voluntarily anymore. They're claiming humanitarian concerns, saying they need to process humans individually to ensure they're not carrying dangerous ideologies back to Earth space." Webb's jaw tightened. The assembly was moving to the next phase of their plan. They weren't just isolating humanity anymore, they were beginning the forced relocation and genetic modification program that their intelligence had warned about. "Sir," Communications Officer Park called from his station. "Incoming priority transmission from Earth Command. It's marked with Omega clearance." Webb felt his blood chill. Omega clearance was reserved for the most extreme scenarios, situations that threatened human survival as a species. He had hoped never to see those codes used. "Transfer it to my ready room," he ordered. "Commander Torres, you have the bridge." The ready room was small but equipped with the most advanced communication systems humanity had ever developed. Webb sealed the door and activated the quantum encryption protocols before accepting the transmission. President Morrison appeared on his screen, but the woman who led the United Earth government looked like she had aged 10 years in the past 3 days. "Marcus," she said without preamble. "The assembly has just delivered an ultimatum. They're demanding complete human withdrawal from all space beyond the Sol system within 30 days. Any humans remaining in their territory after that deadline will be considered property of the assembly, subject to their guidance and improvement." Webb had expected something like this, but hearing it confirmed still felt like a physical blow. "Madam President, what are your orders?" Morrison's expression hardened. "We're implementing Lazarus Protocol, Marcus. Full authorization, all restrictions lifted." For a moment, Webb couldn't speak. Lazarus Protocol was theoretical, a last resort contingency that had been developed in the darkest days of the AI wars 50 years ago. It had never been implemented, never even been seriously considered. The implications were staggering. "Madam President," he said carefully, "Lazarus Protocol calls for actions that would fundamentally change humanity's relationship with every other species in the galaxy. Once we cross that line, there's no going back. Marcus, they're planning to lobotomize our species. They want to turn us into domesticated pets, breeding the independence and creativity out of us over the next few generations. If we don't act now, in 50 years there won't be any real humans left." Webb understood. The assembly had made their choice, and now humanity had to make theirs. What's the time frame? Dr. Chen's team has been working around the clock since the vote. The theoretical models are solid, but they need field testing before full deployment. You have 72 hours to get our people out of assembly space, Marcus. After that, we begin the demonstration. The transmission ended, leaving Webb alone with the weight of what was coming. He returned to the bridge and immediately called for a conference with his senior staff. Within minutes, the ready room was packed with the ship's department heads. These were humanity's best and brightest officers who had spent their careers building bridges between species and working for galactic peace. Now they were being asked to prepare for something that went against everything they believed in. Ladies and gentlemen, Webb began, I'm about to brief you on classified material that will fundamentally change how you view our situation. What I'm about to tell you cannot leave this room under any circumstances. He activated the secure briefing system and began displaying files that most of the officers had never seen before. Project Lazarus had been developed by a small team of scientists and military strategists working under the deepest classification levels. Even Webb had only learned the full details after receiving his current command. For the past 15 years, he explained, our scientists have been studying what we call the human advantage. The assembly views our rapid technological development and social adaptability as threats, but they've never understood the true scope of what makes humanity different. The first display showed comparative charts of technological advancement across different species. Humanity's curve was dramatically steeper than any other line on the graph. Most species in the galaxy follow predictable patterns of development. They advance steadily, plateau for extended periods, then advance again. Their social structures remain stable for millennia. Their technological growth is linear and controllable. Webb touched the controls, bringing up new data. Humanity doesn't follow those patterns. Our development is exponential, chaotic, unpredictable. In 50 years, we've made advances that should have taken other species centuries. But that's not the dangerous part. The display changed to show psychological profiles of various species compared to human baselines. The dangerous part is that we're infectious. Other species that interact extensively with humans begin to show similar patterns of accelerated development and social change. The assembly calls this the human contamination effect. We call it evolution. Commander Torres leaned forward, studying the data. Sir, are you saying we're actually changing other species just by interacting with them? Not changing their biology, Webb clarified. But changing their thinking, their social structures, their willingness to question established authority. The assembly has been dealing with an increasing number of what they call rebellious junior members, all species that have had significant contact with humanity. Science Officer Dr. Patel raised her hand. Admiral, I'm not seeing how this connects to Lazarus Protocol. Enhanced social influence isn't exactly a weapon. Webb's expression darkened. Dr. Patel, what do you know about quantum entanglement communication? Standard technology, sir. Instantaneous communication across any distance by entangling particles. We use it for all our long-range communications. What would you say if I told you that every piece of quantum communication technology in the galaxy is based on modified human designs? That we've been involved in manufacturing or upgrading the quantum communicators used by over 80% of assembly species? The room fell silent as the implications began to sink in. Project Lazarus discovered something remarkable about human quantum communication technology. We don't just communicate through quantum entanglement, we can manipulate it. Every quantum communicator that humans have touched, modified, or manufactured contains what our scientists call quantum backdoors. Microscopic modifications to the entanglement matrices that are completely undetectable to current scanning technology. Dr. Patel looked pale. Sir, you're talking about potential access to the entire galactic communication network. Not potential access, Doctor. Total access. We can monitor, modify, or completely disrupt quantum communications across the galaxy. But that's still not the full scope of Lazarus Protocol. Webb brought up the final set of displays, showing technical diagrams that made several officers gasp. Quantum communicators aren't just used for sending messages. They're integrated into the navigation systems, weapons control, life support management, and even the artificial intelligence networks of virtually every advanced ship and facility in the galaxy. The assembly species have become completely dependent on quantum-based technology. Commander Torres understood first. We can shut down their entire civilization. More than that, Webb replied. We can selectively target specific systems, specific ships, even specific individuals. We can turn their own technology against them in ways they never imagined possible. Every assembly vessel surrounding human colonies, every station detaining our people, every world that voted against us, they're all vulnerable. The room was completely quiet now as the officers processed what they were being told. But, sir, Dr. Patel said slowly, if we use this capability, we're essentially declaring war on the entire galaxy. 3,000 species, millions of worlds, trillions of beings. Webb nodded. That's exactly what we're doing, Doctor. But we're not fighting a conventional war. We're fighting a war of liberation, not just for humanity, but for every species that's been kept under assembly control. He activated a new display showing projected outcomes based on various deployment scenarios. The beauty of Lazarus Protocol is that it's completely surgical. We can target oppressive governments while leaving civilian populations unharmed. We can disable military vessels without killing their crews. We can shut down the infrastructure of control while leaving the infrastructure of survival intact. And then, what? Asked Commander Torres. We can't occupy 3,000 different worlds. We can't govern a galaxy. We don't want to, Webb replied. The goal isn't human dominance. The goal is freedom. We remove the assembly's ability to control and oppress, and we let each species choose their own path forward. Some will hate us for it. Others will thank us. But they'll all be free to make that choice. The briefing continued for another hour as Webb explained the technical details and operational procedures for Lazarus Protocol. When it ended, each officer understood their role in what was about to unfold. As they prepared to leave, Dr. Patel turned back to Webb. Admiral, what if we're wrong? What if this triggers a galactic war that destroys everything? Webb looked out at the stars through the Ready Room's viewport. Somewhere out there, Sarah Chan and thousands of other humans were being held prisoner, facing a future where their very humanity would be slowly carved away. Doctor, the war already started. They just thought they had already won. Dr. Elena Vasquez stared at the quantum resonance chamber that would soon change the fate of every living being in the galaxy. The laboratory beneath Geneva was humanity's most secret facility, hidden 3 kilometers underground and shielded by layers of quantum interference that made it invisible to any known scanning technology. Around her, 60 of Earth's most brilliant scientists worked with focused intensity, making final preparations for the deployment of Lazarus Protocol. They had 72 hours to test, refine, and implement a technology that would either free the galaxy or doom humanity to become the most hated species in cosmic history. Dr. Vasquez called her assistant, Dr. Yuki Tanaka, from across the lab. We're getting confirmation signals from the quantum seeds in the assembly communication network. Coverage is at 96% of all major systems. Elena nodded, though the numbers still amazed her. For 15 years, human technicians had been improving, maintaining, and expanding the galaxy's quantum communication infrastructure. Every routine upgrade, every efficiency improvement, every helpful modification had included microscopic quantum seeds, dormant backdoors that would allow humanity unprecedented access to galactic communications and computer systems. The assembly had welcomed human expertise, pleased to have an enthusiastic junior species handle the tedious technical work that their more advanced civilizations considered beneath them. They had never imagined that humanity wasn't just maintaining their systems, but quietly preparing to control them. Status on the precision targeting algorithms? Elena asked. Dr. James Park looked up from his workstation, where holographic displays showed the locations of every major assembly installation. We've identified and locked onto 17,000 priority targets. All Assembly Council members, fleet command centers, detention facilities holding human prisoners, and key infrastructure nodes. We can selectively disable any or all of them within minutes. Elena moved to the central control station, where the master interface displayed a real-time map of the galaxy. Green dots marked human populations, while red zones showed assembly fleet concentrations. The scale was sobering. Humanity controlled less than 1% of galactic territory, yet they were about to challenge the remaining 99%. Dr. Vasquez, Dr. Sarah Kim called from the biological monitoring station. I'm detecting elevated stress indicators in the quantum field fluctuations. The assembly might be beginning preliminary scans of their own systems. If they discover the quantum seeds before we're ready to deploy. Elena understood the implications. If the assembly found evidence of humanity's quantum infiltration before Lazarus Protocol was activated, they would likely respond with immediate and overwhelming force. Earth itself would become a target for extinction. How much time do we need for full deployment? She asked. Dr. Tanaka consulted her calculations. Minimum 18 hours for basic system penetration. 36 hours for complete network infiltration. But, Dr. Vasquez, we should discuss the ethical protocols one more time. Once we activate Lazarus, we'll have godlike control over galactic civilization. The temptation to abuse that power. Elena had been wrestling with that exact concern since receiving her assignment. Humanity was about to gain the ability to control the lives of trillions of beings across thousands of worlds. The responsibility was almost beyond comprehension. That's why the protocol includes automatic safeguards, she replied. Our access will be time-limited and purpose-specific. We can disable oppressive systems and free prisoners, but we can't take control of other species' governments or dictate their internal policies. The quantum seeds will self-destruct after 96 hours, ensuring we can't become the very tyrants we're fighting against. Dr. Park frowned at his displays. Dr. Vasquez, I'm seeing some anomalous readings from the outer rim sectors. Assembly fleets are moving into attack formations around human colonies. This isn't defensive positioning anymore. Elena moved to his station and studied the tactical data. The pattern was unmistakable. The assembly wasn't just planning to isolate humanity, they were preparing for systematic orbital bombardment of human worlds. The 24-hour deadline they had been given was a lie. The attack would begin much sooner. Dr. Tanaka, contact Admiral Webb immediately. Tell him we're moving to emergency acceleration of the protocol. We go live in 6 hours. Dr. Vasquez, Dr. Kim interrupted urgently, we're receiving a priority transmission from Ambassador Chen at Kepler Station. She somehow managed to access a secure channel. Elena activated the communication system, and Sarah Chen's face appeared on the main display. The diplomat looked haggard and frightened, but her voice was steady. Dr. Vasquez, I don't know if this transmission will reach you, but I need to report what I've learned from the assembly personnel here. They're not just planning relocation and genetic modification. They've discovered something about human quantum technology that has them terrified. Elena felt ice forming in her stomach. What kind of discovery? They know about the quantum seeds. Not all of them, but they've found enough to understand that human technology has been infiltrating their systems for years. They think it's some kind of slow invasion, a plan to gradually take control of galactic civilization. Dr. Park looked up from his station. Dr. Vasquez, if they know about the seeds, they'll be scanning for them actively. We need to deploy immediately, before they can isolate and remove our access points. Elena was already moving toward the master control station. Ambassador Chen, can you estimate how much time we have? Hours at most, Chen replied. Speaker Zilthan has called an emergency session of the Assembly Council. They're debating what they're calling the Human Contamination Protocol. From what I've overheard, it involves immediate sterilization of all human colonies, followed by detailed analysis of every piece of technology humans have ever touched. The laboratory fell silent except for the humming of quantum processors. Elena stared at the control panel that would activate humanity's greatest weapon, knowing that once she pressed those switches, there would be no going back. Dr. Vasquez, Dr. Tanaka said softly, we have another option. We could activate Lazarus in stealth mode, use it only to extract our people and, then, withdraw quietly. Avoid the galactic war entirely. Elena considered the suggestion. It would be the safe choice, the conservative choice. Humanity could retreat to Sol system, close their borders, and try to survive in isolation. But that would mean abandoning every oppressed species in the galaxy, every civilization that could benefit from freedom, every being that was suffering under assembly rule. It would mean proving the assembly right about human selfishness. No, she said firmly. If we're going to do this, we do it right. Full deployment, all targets, complete liberation. If the galaxy is going to hate us, let them hate us for freeing them. She began entering her authorization codes into the master control system. Around the laboratory, her team moved to their positions, preparing to make history. Dr. Vasquez, Dr. Kim called out, "I'm detecting massive quantum fluctuations from assembly space. They're beginning active scans of their communication networks. If we're going to do this, it has to be now." Elena's fingers hovered over the final activation sequence. Once she pressed these keys, humanity would be committed to a path that would either transform the galaxy or destroy them utterly. There would be no middle ground, no negotiation, no compromise. She thought about Ambassador Chin, trapped on Kepler Station. She thought about the thousands of other humans being held prisoner across assembly space. She thought about the countless alien species that had never known freedom, never imagined that their oppression wasn't the natural order of the universe. She thought about what humanity could become if they chose courage over safety. "All stations report ready," Dr. Tanaka announced. Elena entered the final sequence and placed her hand on the activation control. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to change the galaxy forever. May history judge us kindly." She pressed the activation key. Across the laboratory, quantum resonance chambers hummed to life. On displays throughout the facility, green lights began appearing as humanity's hidden seeds throughout the galactic communication network awakened and began transmitting their infiltration protocols. Within minutes, humanity would have unprecedented access to every major computer system, communication network, and technological infrastructure in assembly space. The most powerful civilizations in the galaxy would suddenly find their own technology turned against them. But Elena wasn't thinking about the tactical implications anymore. She was thinking about a message that would be transmitted simultaneously to every communication device in the galaxy, a message that would announce humanity's intentions to trillions of beings. The message was simple, only one word, but it carried the weight of revolution. Escape. The word would appear on every screen, echo through every speaker, and burn itself into every consciousness in the galaxy. It would be humanity's declaration of war against tyranny and oppression, their promise that freedom was no longer just a dream. It would be the beginning of the end of the old galactic order. As the quantum seeds fully activated and began their work, Elena Vasquez wondered if they had just saved the galaxy or doomed it. Either way, the universe would never be the same. Speaker Zilfin was in the middle of addressing the Emergency Assembly Council session when every screen in the Great Hall went dark. For a moment, the massive chamber fell silent, 3,000 representatives staring at blank displays in confusion. Then, in perfect synchronization, every screen displayed a single word in blazing white letters: escape. The word pulsed once, twice, and then the screens returned to normal. But, across the chamber, delegates were checking their personal communication devices, their administrative tablets, their private secure networks. Every single device had displayed the same message. Zilfin's forearms trembled as he realized the implications. Somehow, humanity had just accessed every piece of technology in the assembly simultaneously. The scope of the infiltration was beyond anything they had imagined. "Emergency lockdown," he commanded, his voice echoing through the chamber. "All systems offline immediately. Full security sweep of all networks." But it was already too late. In the detention center on Kepler Station, Ambassador Sarah Chen watched with growing amazement as the force fields containing the human prisoners simply shut off. Emergency lighting activated as the main power grid began cycling through diagnostic routines, and the doors to their cells unlocked with soft chimes. "What's happening?" asked Dr. Martinez, one of the xenobiologists who had been arrested during the initial sweep. Sarah looked at her personal communicator, which had somehow reactivated despite being confiscated hours earlier. The display showed a simple message: extraction protocols activated. Proceed to Shuttle Bay 7. Transportation waiting. I think, Sarah said slowly, we're going home. Across assembly space, similar scenes were playing out on hundreds of worlds and stations. Human prisoners found their restraints deactivated, their guards' weapons mysteriously malfunctioning, and their detention facilities experiencing convenient power failures that opened every lock and door. But the liberation of human prisoners was only the beginning. On the core world of the Veltar Empire, Chancellor Kelvorn was reviewing military deployment orders when his personal workstation began displaying information he had never requested. Technical specifications for human quantum communication technology filled his screen, accompanied by detailed analysis that made his blood run cold. The report revealed that human modifications to Veltar communication systems had been far more extensive than anyone had realized. Every quantum relay, every data processing center, every military communication hub in the Empire had been quietly upgraded with human-designed components over the past decade. Components that gave humanity complete access to every secret the Veltar Empire possessed. Kelvorn activated his emergency communicator to contact Speaker Zilfin, but, instead of his expected secure channel, he found himself connected to an open broadcast that was being transmitted across the entire Empire. On his screen, a human face appeared, a woman with kind eyes and graying hair. Citizens of the Veltar Empire, the woman said in perfect Veltar dialect, my name is President Morrison of Earth. I speak to you now not as an enemy, but as a fellow being who understands the desire for freedom. Kelvorn tried to shut off the transmission, but his controls were completely unresponsive. For 30,000 years, President Morrison continued, your empire has been ruled by the same noble families, while ordinary citizens live under restrictions that limit your ability to choose your own paths. Today, that changes. The broadcast switched to display classified documents from the Veltar government archives. Tax records showing how the noble families paid almost nothing while working families bore crushing burdens. Military reports describing the brutal suppression of peaceful protests. Communication intercepts revealing how the government monitored and controlled even private conversations between citizens. Similar broadcasts were occurring simultaneously across hundreds of worlds. On Makari stations, reptilian citizens learned how their hegemony had been selling them into indentured servitude to other species. On Zorvani colonies, insectoid workers discovered that their supposedly democratic councils were actually controlled by off-world corporate interests. On Threllan homeworlds, aquatic populations saw evidence of how their resources were being stripped away to fund luxury projects for their rulers. In each case, the revelations were accompanied by the same simple message, you deserve better. The choice is yours. Admiral Webb watched the deployment unfold from the Bridge of the Defiance, monitoring reports from across the galaxy as humanity's quantum seeds awakened and began their work. The tactical displays showed the immediate effects of Lazarus Protocol activation. Assembly fleet formations around human colonies suddenly found their ships experiencing cascading system failures. Weapons wouldn't charge, navigation systems provided false readings, and communication arrays transmitted only static. Within minutes, the overwhelming military advantage the assembly had counted on simply evaporated. Admiral, Commander Torres reported, were receiving surrender requests from 47 assembly battle groups. They're reporting complete system failures and requesting immediate technical assistance. Webb almost smiled at the irony. The same species that had voted to eliminate humanity as a threat were now begging for human help to fix their broken technology. Patch me through to all assembly commanders in this sector, he ordered. When the channel opened, Webb found himself addressing dozens of alien commanders whose faces displayed varying degrees of confusion, fear, and anger. I am Admiral Webb of the United Earth Fleet, he began. By now you understand that humanity has capabilities you did not suspect. Your weapons are offline, your ships are dead in space, and your communications are under our control. But we are not your enemies. A Makari commander with elaborate facial scarring hissed angrily. You have attacked us without provocation. This is an act of war. Commander, Webb replied calmly, you surrounded our colonies with battle fleets. You detained our civilians without cause. You voted to eliminate our species as a threat to your control. We have simply responded to your aggression in the most effective way possible. What do you want? Asked a Veltar admiral whose elegant features were twisted with rage. Webb's expression hardened. We want what every being in the galaxy should want. Freedom. The right to choose our own path. The right to live without fear of oppression. And, we're not just demanding it for ourselves. On screens throughout the assembly fleets, data began streaming. Evidence of corruption, oppression, and abuse gathered from across the galactic government. Trade agreements that enslaved entire species. Military operations that had wiped out civilizations for the crime of seeking independence. Secret programs that had eliminated individuals whose only offense was speaking truth to power. For 30 millennia, Webb continued, the Assembly has maintained order through control and oppression. You've told yourselves it was necessary, that primitive species needed guidance, that freedom would lead to chaos. Today, you learn the cost of that philosophy. Dr. Elena Vasquez monitored the quantum network from her laboratory beneath Geneva, watching as humanity's seed spread through every major system in the galaxy. The technical elegance of the operation amazed her. They weren't destroying anything, simply revealing what already existed and giving everyone access to information that had been hidden. Dr. Vasquez, Dr. Tanaka called from her station, were detecting massive social unrest on over 200 assembly worlds. Revolutionary movements, peaceful protests, and, in some cases, complete governmental collapse. The information releases are having exactly the effect we predicted. Elena nodded, though she felt the weight of responsibility for what they had unleashed. Across the galaxy, beings were learning truths that would reshape their understanding of their place in the universe. Some would use that knowledge to build better societies. Others might descend into chaos and violence. Any response from the Assembly Council, she asked. They're trying to organize a coordinated response, but their communication systems are completely compromised. Every message they send is being automatically broadcast to their entire populations. They can't coordinate in secret anymore. Elena watched the displays showing the breakdown of assembly authority across thousands of worlds. Revolution was spreading like wildfire, fueled by information that had been kept secret for millennia. The old galactic order was collapsing in real time. Her communicator chimed with an incoming priority message from Admiral Webb. Dr. Vasquez, we're receiving communication requests from Assembly Council members. They want to negotiate. Should I respond? Elena considered the question. Humanity now held all the cards, could dictate any terms they wanted. But, the point of Lazarus Protocol had never been human dominance, it had been freedom for everyone. Tell them we'll listen, she replied. But, make it clear that any agreement must include immediate release of all human prisoners, withdrawal of assembly fleets from human space, and, most importantly, recognition of the right of all species to self-determination. She paused, thinking about the galaxy that was emerging from the ashes of assembly control. And, Admiral? Make sure they understand that the information releases will continue until every being in the galaxy has access to the truth about their own governments. The age of keeping populations ignorant and controlled is over. As Elena ended the communication, she looked at the quantum resonance chambers that had made it all possible. In a few hours, the galaxy had transformed from an authoritarian empire into something new and unpredictable. Billions of beings were learning for the first time that they had choices, that they could determine their own fate. The revolution was just beginning. 6 months after the deployment of Lazarus Protocol, Ambassador Sarah Chen stood once again in the Great Hall of the Galactic Assembly. But everything had changed. The massive chamber that had once housed 3,000 representatives of established power now echoed with the voices of nearly 10,000 delegates from across the galaxy. Species that had never been allowed representation in the old assembly sat alongside former rulers who were now answerable to populations that finally knew the truth about their governance. The crystalline walls still reached toward the dome displaying the galaxy, but the image itself was different. Instead of zones of control marked by ancient boundaries, the display now showed thousands of independent systems, free worlds, and voluntary alliances that had formed in the wake of the revolution. Sarah took her seat as the newly elected speaker called the session to order. The speaker was a young Zorvani female named Cathara, whose insectoid features showed the determination of someone who had fought for every word she would speak today. Fellow beings of the Free Galactic Assembly, Cathara began, her translated voice carrying across the chamber, we gather today to address the proposal known as the Universal Rights Charter, as submitted by the Coalition of Earth, and to hear the final statements regarding humanity's role in our new galactic order. Sarah looked across the chamber at the various delegations. The Veltar Empire had fractured into dozens of independent worlds, most of which had elected their own representatives for the first time in millennia. The Makari hegemony had dissolved entirely, replaced by a confederation of free reptilian colonies. Even the ancient core worlds had undergone revolutionary changes, their populations finally able to choose their own forms of government. Not all the changes had been peaceful. Some worlds had descended into chaos when their oppressive governments collapsed. Others had struggled with civil wars between those who wanted freedom and those who preferred the stability of the old order. But, across the galaxy, the trend was clear: beings who had never known they had choices were learning to make them. The floor recognizes former Chancellor Kelvorn of the Veltar hegemony, Kethera announced. Kelvorn rose slowly, his forearms showing the slight tremor that had developed since losing his position of absolute power. When he spoke, his voice carried none of its former authority. Honored delegates, I stand before you today as a representative of those who once held power under the old system. I will not pretend that what humanity did to us was welcome or that many of us did not view it as an unprovoked attack. Murmurs ran through the chamber as former assembly loyalists shifted uncomfortably in their seats. But, I must also acknowledge what we have learned in these past months. My own people, the Veltar, have discovered capabilities and creativity that we did not know they possessed. When freed from the rigid hierarchies that had controlled them for 30,000 years, they have begun to explore art, science, and philosophy in ways that our nobles had forbidden. Kelvorn paused, and Sarah could see the struggle in his expression as he forced himself to continue. Our agricultural worlds, once bound by quotas and restrictions, are now producing more food than ever before because farmers are free to innovate and experiment. Our industrial colonies have developed new technologies because workers are allowed to suggest improvements. Our military forces have become more effective because officers can speak truth to their superiors without fear of punishment. He looked directly at the human delegation as he spoke his next words. Humanity did not destroy our civilization. They revealed what our civilization could become when freed from oppression. For this, despite our initial anger and fear, we owe them a debt that can never be fully repaid. The chamber erupted in debate as delegates from hundreds of worlds voiced their agreement or disagreement with Kelvorn's statement. Sarah noticed that the support seemed to come primarily from representatives of former subject worlds, while opposition came mostly from the descendants of the old ruling classes. When order was restored, Kethera recognized the next speaker. The floor recognizes Representative Czar of the Threllan Collective. Czar was an aquatic being whose translation unit allowed his underwater speech patterns to be heard clearly throughout the chamber. His people had been among the most oppressed under assembly rule, forced to work in hazardous mining operations while their ocean worlds were slowly poisoned by industrial waste. 6 months ago, my people were dying. Our children were born with mutations caused by toxins that we were forbidden to complain about. Our councils were controlled by off-world corporations that viewed us as expendable labor. We had no hope, no future, no voice. Czar's artificial voice carried an emotion that transcended species barriers. Today, our oceans run clean for the first time in centuries. Our children swim in waters that will nourish rather than poison them. We have reclaimed our worlds and our dignity. When the humans sent us that single word, escape, they gave us something we had forgotten existed, the possibility of hope. As the debates continued throughout the day, Sarah reflected on the 6 months that had passed since Lazarus Protocol activation. The immediate aftermath had been chaotic, with some assembly leaders attempting to organize military responses against Earth. But Admiral Webb's demonstration of humanity's quantum warfare capabilities had quickly ended such thoughts. The complete shutdown of the Centauri defense fleet for exactly 1 hour had shown the galaxy that humanity could disable any military force at will. But, more importantly, the fact that they had restored all systems without causing permanent damage had demonstrated that they were interested in liberation, not conquest. Dr. Vasquez had been right about the automatic safeguards built into Lazarus Protocol. After 96 hours, humanity's quantum seeds had self-destructed, returning control of galactic communication systems to their original owners. But, by then, the damage to authoritarian control was irreversible. Populations across the galaxy had seen the truth about their governments, and no amount of censorship could make them forget. Earth had made a strategic decision that surprised many former Assembly members. Instead of leveraging their quantum warfare capabilities to establish human dominance, they had voluntarily shared the technology with the new Free Galactic Assembly, along with the safeguards that prevented it from being used for oppression. The message was clear: humanity had not fought for the right to replace the Assembly as galactic overlords. They had fought for the right of all beings to determine their own fate. The floor recognizes Ambassador Sarah Chen of Earth, Kethera announced. Sarah rose and walked to the central podium, looking out at the thousands of faces that represented the new galactic order. When she spoke, her words were carried to every world in the galaxy through the same quantum communication network that had once been humanity's secret weapon. Fellow beings of the galaxy, 6 months ago, humanity faced extinction as a free species. We were told that our independence was a threat to galactic stability, that our refusal to accept subjugation was a danger to established order. We were given a choice: surrender our freedom or face annihilation. She paused, letting the words sink in. We chose a third option. We chose to offer freedom to everyone. Sarah activated the holographic display behind her, showing statistical data that had been gathered across the galaxy since the revolution. In the past 6 months, technological innovation across the galaxy has increased by over 300%. Artistic and cultural production has exploded as species rediscover creativity that had been suppressed for millennia. Scientific research has accelerated as information that was once classified becomes freely available to all beings. The display changed to show economic data. Former slave worlds are now producing surplus resources that they can trade freely. Species that were once forced into specific economic roles are exploring new industries and opportunities. The gross galactic product has increased by 40%, even without the centralized planning that the Assembly claimed was necessary for efficiency. Sarah looked directly at the former Assembly loyalists as she continued. The old order claimed that freedom would lead to chaos, that beings needed the guidance of their betters to maintain civilization. The evidence suggests otherwise. When given the chance to choose their own paths, the vast majority of beings choose cooperation, prosperity, and peace. She gestured to the chamber around them. This assembly contains 10 times more representatives than the old one, yet it operates more efficiently because every delegate is truly accountable to their constituents. Decisions are made more quickly because they don't require the approval of distant rulers who have never seen the worlds they claim to govern. The display changed again, showing military statistics. Even in terms of security, the new order has proven more effective than the old. Voluntary defense alliances have replaced forced military service. Conflicts are resolved through negotiation and arbitration rather than suppression and conquest. Galactic peace is maintained not through fear of overwhelming force, but through mutual respect and shared prosperity. Sarah's expression grew more serious as she addressed the final point of her speech. But humanity understands that freedom is not a gift that can be given once and then forgotten. It must be defended constantly, sometimes from external threats, but more often from those who would trade liberty for security or convenience. She looked directly at Kelvorn and the other former Assembly leaders. That is why Earth supports the Universal Rights Charter not as a temporary measure, but as a permanent foundation for galactic civilization. The right of every being to determine their own fate, to speak truth without fear, to pursue their own happiness without interference from those who claim to know better. Sarah's voice carried across the silent chamber as she delivered her final words. 6 months ago, we sent a single word to the galaxy: escape. Today, I offer a different word: thrive. That is what freedom makes possible. That is what we fought for. That is what we will continue to defend. As Sarah returned to her seat, the chamber erupted in sustained applause from thousands of beings across hundreds of species. The vote on the Universal Rights Charter was unanimous, the first unanimous vote in the history of galactic civilization. Later, as delegates filed out of the chamber to return to their free worlds and chosen governments, Sarah stood once again at the observation deck. But, instead of watching assembly fleets preparing for conquest, she saw merchant vessels carrying trade goods between independent worlds, exploration ships heading toward unexplored regions of the galaxy, and passenger liners filled with beings who were free to travel wherever they chose. Her communicator chimed with an incoming message from Dr. Vasquez on Earth. Sarah, I wanted you to know that we've completed the final phase of the project. Every piece of quantum communication technology in the galaxy now includes the same anti-oppression safeguards that were built into Lazarus Protocol. No government will ever again be able to control information or spy on their populations without their knowledge. Sarah smiled as she watched a ship full of young Veltar artists departing for the Outer Rim, where they would establish the galaxy's first interspecies cultural exchange program. Elena, I think we actually did it. We changed everything. No, Dr. Vasquez replied. We just gave everyone the chance to change themselves. That's all freedom really is, the opportunity to become what you choose to be. As Sarah ended the communication, she reflected on how far they had all come. Humanity had faced extinction as a free species and had responded by freeing the galaxy. They had been called a threat to stability and had proven that true stability came from justice, not oppression. The old Galactic Assembly had lasted 30,000 years through fear and control. The new Free Galactic Assembly would endure because every being in it had chosen to be there. And, in the end, that single word, escape, had become something more than a threat or a promise. It had become a universal declaration that freedom was not just humanity's birthright, but the birthright of every conscious being in the universe. The galaxy would never be the same. And that was exactly how humanity had intended it to be.